would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Hello, everyone. It's me, the Rebel Broker. Welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities. I'm trying to change things up a little bit with today's show. I'm trying to break the cycle of agony that I've been in since Thursday of last week. And I figured, a slight modification to the intro that's been the same for 9 years, coming up on 10 years. Maybe that'd do it. Maybe that would shake the universe enough. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. I do truly appreciate it. If you'd like to get in contact with me, the best way is to head on over to therebelbroker.com. We have now given out a total of $150 to all the loyal listeners who have headed over to therebelbroker.com, clicked on the big red button at the top that says, take the survey to support the show. Just use the same email address both times you're asked, answer a handful of questions, and boom, you are in. We'll be doing another drawing at the beginning of January for another $50 winner. Congratulations to all those who've won in October, November, and now December. I do appreciate you taking the time out to follow through on that survey. It's a great way to potentially win some cash, and it's also a big help to the show. So thank you very much for doing that. As you all know, well, maybe this is the very first time you've ever listened. So sit down, relax, or drive carefully on your way to work. Had a power outage here on Thursday last week, and in addition to, and I happened to be doing the show when the power went out. So that absolutely screwed up doing a brand spanking new show for Friday. So sorry about that. I think the Friday show that you saw or that you had was a best of version of the show. And then, of course, in trying to recover everything over the last few days, that was a huge pain. So I think everything is back in working order now. If you're listening to this, then odds are everything's fine. We'll see. Boy, but I tell you, it just makes me glad that there's a couple of tech things, really, that I think are good pieces of advice that I want to share with you in the beginning of today's show. Number one, always have a backup plan as it relates to important data in your life. And whether that's your family photos or important documents that are all on your computer, make sure you've got a plan. Now, my family tends to do the keep all of your photos in the cloud thing so that no matter what happens to your computer, you're always able to reconnect with all of your old photos. I'm a little bit more privacy oriented, so I'm not sure I like the idea of having every photo of everyone in my family all up on the cloud. But that's a great way to do it. I had a family member whose machine took a huge dump, totally unrecoverable. And they had just about 6 months before put every single photo they have up on the cloud. So it was absolutely 100% recovered. And that was really what they cared about most. In my case, I carry around in a keychain a ridiculously small 164 gigabyte thumb drive. And my hard drive really got taken out and a lot of stuff got lost, but all the important stuff was on that little thumb drive. I have it. I save stuff to that thumb drive that's critical, so that saved me. So just always have a backup plan, man. I can't even tell you how unbelievably unpleasant my life would have been if I had lost all of the data that was on that particular drive. So just a word of warning. And in the theme of word of warnings, little bits of wisdom that I can share to help you make your life just a little bit better. I am one of the things I'm super thankful for is that there are plenty of folks out there in the audience who kind of like interacting with me, and mostly it's in the form of sending me articles that you've come across. And I've noticed lately some. I don't know if I'm just noticing it for the first time or it's just something that's been really more common over the last 3 to 6 months. But I'm getting a lot of articles that when you send me the URLs for them, they are clearly bad links. And by bad, I mean the links themselves are being created in a way to give you the impression that they're coming from one source when they're actually coming from another source. And this has been with a few news items. And I thought I'd give you a quick rundown on the way to defend yourself against bad links, right? And this will work for everything. This will work for that iTunes email that you get that says you need to reset your password, or that email that sounds like it's coming from Bank of America or Wells Fargo telling you your account needs to be reset. You know, even those of us who get those from those banks, even when we don't have accounts at those banks, those kinds of things. It could be anything. It could be claim your money from the Nigerian prince. It could to click here. It could be we've had a security breach at PayPal. Please click this. This idea works for everything. And it's really not that complicated, but I think it will help you 99.9% of the time. And here's what you need to do. Whenever you get something like that, if it's a button or if it's a URL that's just the words are highlighted, so there's a URL hiding underneath it where if you click it, it'll open up in your browser. Like when it says click here and the letters are blue and underlined. In most email clients that you'd use, so if you're on a Mac, if you're using Mail, or maybe you're using just whatever email client you're using, if you take your mouse and you hover over a link and you let it sit there long enough, it'll pop up either in a little spot at the bottom of the window of your email client or right there over where your mouse is. It'll bring up the URL that it's going to take you to if you click that. Now, let's say you're trying to help out the Rebel Broker by sending along a news item that you got from somewhere. Maybe it was sent directly to you. Maybe it was through some sort of a portal site that funnels news and filters it for you. And you thought it was legit because you saw that NBC was in the URL, figuring, oh, okay, cool. Well, here's where that gets tricky. You need to make sure that the part that you trust is directly to the left of the .com part or the .org part or the .net part. So in other words, if we'll use that iTunes example, if you are getting something from that you think is from iTunes, it looks right, the logos are right, the phrasing seems correct, and it wants you to reset your password, hover over the button it's presenting to you. And find you don't need to look at all that crazy junk that's after the .com. You need to go to the very beginning of it. And it might, if it says apple.check.x.v.com, that's not Apple, right? You need to look at I think they call it an A record in the networking world. And that basically means a something.com or a something.org. For instance, soldbyrobert.com or therebelbroker.com. TheRebelBroker.com, you know that it's from me if you see that it's TheRebelBroker.com / right? That's coming from my site. If it said TheRebelBroker.JustinsWebsite.com, well, then that's not from me. Whoever owns that URL can put anything they want to the left of the part that's to the left of .com. So the apple.com is always going to be from apple.com or take you to some part of apple.com because that's the core URL. So if you get something that you're not sure if it's from your bank, if it says it could say anything .wellsfargo.com. It could say anything .bankofamerica.com. As long as the thing to the left of the .com is your trusted URL, then you're good. Even if there's stuff to the left of that, you're still good because that same core company, that same core entity controls what would appear to the left. And I even have some of that. I do have a few items that will sometimes appear before therebelbroker.com if you get different links from me for different types of things. So just something I wanted to throw out there because I've seen an increase in the number of things that folks are sending to me that fall into that category of untrustworthy because of that. I don't know if these are just emails that are getting generated by folks who are trying to pose as my listeners and send me stuff to click. But just to give you a heads up, that's how that stuff works. So I hope that's helpful. It can absolutely save you from fake news or folks trying to fish for your log on and password information for various things. Just keep that in mind and never click on anything if you cannot suss out what the URL is that it actually takes you to. And another way to do that, if it doesn't pop up automatically when you hover over it. If you right click on it, it should give you the option to copy the URL that it would take you to, and then just paste that into a text file or something and look at that first part, look at the whatever.com or .org, and just make sure it's something that you trust. And as long as that front end is a trustworthy URL, you're good to go. Okay. We're going to talk about property management today. We've touched on this a bit. I gave what I thought was probably the best nugget of practical wisdom that I drew out of 2016. And that related to how property management does not make any sense for vacation rentals. 0 cents. And the more I think about it, the more I get myself going on it. I realize that there can be a nuanced answer to that. Now, I do have a property manager for my vacation property in Hawaii. However, they don't do anything relating to booking folks or getting paid or any of that stuff. I pay them. They don't write me a check at the end of the month. I write them a check. We've agreed on a lowered rate based on this reality. So, and they will get, and if they do provide a renter, they get their ridiculously bloated rate. But I'll tell you what, here, I don't even know if I shared this before. I've now been doing this. We're coming up on 1.5 years, and my property manager has provided exactly 0 renters. 0 for my vacation rental. I have provided him with 4 renters for other units he manages because mine was booked. So there have been instances where he has owed me more than I have owed him because he has to pay me at the same ridiculous rate he expects me to pay him when he brings folks. So that's been kind of fun. And I did a whole show. I think I actually did a named show on this subject, but let me just run it down real quick. I won't give you the full version. The reason why it makes no sense to use a property manager for your vacation properties is because it's a conflict of interest for them. Many property management firms own properties. Many folks who work, many of the individual human beings may own a property. Other properties may rent for more than your property, meaning they'll get rented first because these folks want the bigger payday. Their vested interest is in potentially renting your property last behind a relatively long line of other properties. And I feel like I'm talking about this from the closest thing you could do to a controlled study that is as scientific as possible, because the folks who owned this property prior to me tried to do the exact same thing. They tried to do it as a vacation rental, used the exact same property manager I currently use in a more limited fashion, but they just handed it all off to him. Almost never rented. It was vacant the vast majority of the time. I now control the booking. I control collecting the money. All they do is greet the people, give them a key, make sure they're settled, be there for an emergency person. That's it. And my place is rented the vast majority of the time. I think when I ran the numbers last time, it's like an 80% rented. I was talking about this actually on the show last time where I thought, I'm trying to figure out ways to get that rate higher, to get it rented even more. Well, the way I've been renting it is it's required to have a minimum of a 3-day stay. And I did some more analysis and discovered that's why it's not filling up quite as much. If I were to bring it down to 2-day stays, it would totally blow it out in terms of filling it up more. But frankly, I'm just not sure about how much my cleaning staff could keep up with that. So I'm still debating on whether or not to make that change. So we'll see. But anyway, so that's why. Now, I came across an article on this kind of on the same subject where the folks at biggerpockets give the 8 reasons why using property management is a waste of time. And so at the outset here, if we're talking about vacation rentals, I completely agree. I don't think there's any question. I think the argument is absolutely crystal clear. No one has a higher vested interest in you getting that thing rented than you do. So I think you need to own at least that part. Now, what I'd like to do next is get into their reasons and try to figure out what makes sense. How does this affect a potential strategy for you as a property owner and equate it with their claim, which is even for long-term rentals, even if you're not doing vacation rentals, they're saying why using property managers is a bad idea. We're going to cover that in just a second, but we're going to take a really quick break, so don't go away. We'll be right back.
Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right, aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408-852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909.
Welcome back, everyone. We are going over Bigger Pockets' story relating to the 8 reasons why using a property manager is a bad idea. I already recapped my reasons for the claim that I would agree 100% in terms of vacation properties are concerned. But I thought we'd run through theirs and look at it rationally, and we'll try to divvy this up. Well, so much of this comes down to your comfort level. I've talked a lot in the past about leveraging off of a property manager, but what I would say is before we even get into it, don't even let a potentially valid point like this make you say, "Oh well, I don't want to have to deal with it, so maybe I just shouldn't get into investing." That's not the answer to the question. This is simply another one of those going into it eyes wide open and understanding what you're potentially passing up. It's about full disclosure, right? It's about understanding that these are the things, these are the realities surrounding my decision to use property management. And if you really just don't want to deal with it, if it's positive cash flow with property management, keep doing it. Is it as positive cash flow as it would be without property management? No, of course, because you're paying a chunk to your property management firm. But don't let this be an excuse to not push forward. Don't decide that, well, since I don't want to do property management, then I just shouldn't do this at all. And that's not the way to think about it. I would much rather have you think of this as simply gathering all the data you need to make an informed decision. Okay? So let me just put that out there right off the bat. Now, number 1 on their list is you sacrifice your cash flow. Well, of course you do. You're giving up 8 to 10% of what comes in to these folks. Now, let me talk about that number for a second, the 8 to 10% number. It's worth dicing that stuff up. If you're someone who's anal retentive about screening tenants and you absolutely want to be the person to pick the tenant and you just want them to be the people who take care of it once it's been rented, that doesn't sound like a 10% per month earn on the part of that property manager. You're going to have to check, though. And I mean, the other thing you need to realize is that just like in the world of real estate, there are agents that absolutely earn that commission and more. There are agents who absolutely do not earn that commission or even less. And sadly, there's a lot of them. If you find a property manager who is absolutely earning that money, they're like gold. But here's the difference. I mentioned my disappointment when I went and visited my unit and saw what was going on. Just slapdash bull being done in my name. Instead of having a high attention to detail, instead of being a solutions oriented, instead of being folks who said this does not look good, we should do something different, they just let it slide, right? I told you about the broken frame that was fixed with duct tape. I told you about the sliding screen door that had broken, and instead of being dealt with and removed, was just laying there on the balcony. I talked to you about the broken light fixture where no one had bothered to mention to me that there was a broken light fixture. I just get there and there's a broken light fixture. So if you've got someone who's in there paying that kind of attention to your property, keeping the quality up, making sure that everything looks the way it should, making sure that it looks impressive or as impressive as it can all the time, those folks are absolutely worth what you're paying them. And at least in the context of my situation, that's absolutely true for a vacation property. Who knows how long it'll take me to find someone with that mindset, but that's what I'm looking for. For you, it could take a different form entirely. Maybe a property manager who's managing your long-term rental. Let's say you've got a year-to-year lease and you're renting that thing regular. Are they earning their money if they're just waiting for those checks to arrive and they never even see the property over the years you're renting it? Probably not. Maybe that one phone call every 6 months about a clogged up toilet or something weird going on with the sound coming out of the refrigerator. Does that really mean that they're earning their money? No, it doesn't. Here's what does. Maybe every month someone drives by that house and takes a photo of the outside and texts it to you. It says, just did a drive-by, front yard still looks good, everything looks fine. That kind of stuff. Now that's a property manager who's doing their job, right? So keep that all in mind, right? We talk about these things in a singular fashion as if every property manager equals every other property manager, and that's just not true. Okay. So let's go ahead and assume this 10% thing, and I'm going to read directly here from you their example, which I think is kind of an interesting way to put it. In reality, that 10% doesn't seem like much, but you're actually giving up a significant part of your cash flow. At $1,000 a month rental, that's a $100 fee. And if you invested $20,000 in a property that you expected to get a 10% cash on cash return, you will get back approximately $2,000 annually after the PM fees, the property management fees. Now skip the property manager and your return would be $3,200. That's a whopping 60% higher. In addition to the monthly fees, paying a month's worth of rent to actually place a tenant blows the numbers out even further. So it's a good argument, but it's a pay-to-play scenario. I think that this discussion can be more broad than that, can take in more aspects of what you need as a property owner, particularly when a reality may be that you're not going to be local. You may be in a completely different state. So the question doesn't become if you're going to have a property manager. You may still. Back in the days when I rented a house, the best house I ever rented when I was living in Cupertino and still going to school was owned by a guy in New Hampshire and never had any trouble. We just paid our rent on time. I think he flew out once in the 2 years that we lived there, and that was just before we were moving out, so we just kind of do a walkthrough. And for him, it was the easiest rental ever, but if I'm honest, I was an awesome tenant. Well, me and my 3 buddies were awesome tenants. So absolutely, and he chose wisely. He talked to us, he interviewed us. I discovered later he absolutely checked our references, so he did a good job screening the tenants. Number 2, you have a higher motivation. Even if they've worked for a property management firm, these are property managers, they have not felt the pain of a bad tenant and have never had to open their own checkbook to pay for it. Their motivation is to make the commission, not make you money. That is not an inaccurate thing to say, but that's also an item that comes up when you're evaluating your property manager. Because the reality is, if they don't facilitate you making money, they will fire you, right? If you're that property manager and the perception is that property manager is not doing their job to make you money or to streamline the process of you getting paid your rent, that property manager is not going to keep their job for very long. Now, one thing that they say here that I think is actually a pretty good one is that proximity is not necessarily important. Even property managers you're going to hire are not going to be that close to the property. They just have to make calls. In one PM contract, this author read, they only guarantee 4 hours per year of on-site time to handle the property, which is another good reason to read whatever contract you might sign with a property management firm. It's ridiculous. How can anyone with a straight face look up to you after you finish reading a line like that and say, hold on a second, for my 10%, you're only guaranteeing 4 hours per year of on-site time to handle the property? Thank you, but no, I'll pass. That's not what I call earning their money. And above and beyond that, the property managers in these contracts will often then charge an hourly rate, a $75 per hour rate. Anyway, number 3 on their list, they make money at every turn. Property managers make money when they fill a rental. They make money when they do maintenance as markup. They make money when they have to do an eviction for their bad tenant. They make money when they turn a rental for a new tenant. They make money when they place a new tenant. So this is an interesting point to make, and I don't know if these guys are just the crappiest negotiators ever, and I'm guessing not. Bigger Pockets is not a place for guys that are crappy negotiators. But I've had someone manage my property before. In my case, there was no choice. This wasn't even a case of being far away. This was a case of being in another country, being something in the neighborhood of 12 hours off from here. So it was the difference between potentially getting a call from them at 3 o'clock in the morning. And so I had to have a property manager, in my opinion, to make that work. I did not pay anything above the percentage. In other words, when they had to find the renter, when they had to deal with renter stuff, it was all written in the contract that I paid the cost of the repairs and that there would be no markup for the property manager for them to take as profit. In fact, they even had a thing in there where I could stipulate who would provide the service for different things. Next, all they got was their 10%. That's it. That's all I ever paid them. They filled the place with a tenant. They maintained the tenant. They oversaw the property while the tenant was there. And that was kind of it. So if you've got a contract with a lot of these extra things stipulated in there, you need to start having a chat with your property manager. And if you can't get satisfaction, it's time to talk to a new property manager. Next on their list of reasons not to get a property manager is their guarantee doesn't guarantee all that much. When a property manager brings in a tenant, they usually guarantee the tenant, but that doesn't mean you get money back. It doesn't mean they pay you anything. It simply means that they'll just find you a new tenant. Which, I'm not sure that's horribly unreasonable. But, here's a core problem I have with that whole scenario in the first place. Now, of course, it's going to depend on why the tenant left. If it was a bad tenant, left it in bad shape, you're still going to be on the hook for those repairs. And my feeling is if they got the tenant, and you've got a tenant who ended up being bad, and not just because they left or something changed. I mean, you're always going to encounter someone. I've been that tenant, despite the fact I've normally been a very good tenant. I had rented a house and just 2 months later had to exit the property because of a breakup with the person I was moving in with. So that ended up being okay. I apologized. I made it all clear to my landlord what the situation was, and it ended up working out okay. But that's not a tenant screening problem. I mean, they could check everything about me and realize I'm an excellent renter. Just something came up, right? But if it is a situation where you feel that the tenant was bad and would have been obviously bad if a more responsible background check would have been done, I think that's a very reasonable conversation to have with your property management firm, and not when it happens, but before you sign on the dotted line. And throw that out there as an example. Say, listen, part of the way you're earning the money I'm paying you is that you're jumping through the hoops to do a reasonably good job, maybe more than a reasonably good job, to do a good job screening tenants, which means I expect the absolute minimum of you call all references, you do a background check, you do a search on the databases where landlords share their horrible experiences with tenants, and that you do all of these things. And if we end up finding a tenant who proves to be a very bad tenant, if I then go and check on those sites and discover information you didn't originally disclose to me or didn't discuss before we rented to this person, I expect you to potentially have some liability there because you did not do your job. Now, no one's ever going to agree to that. I think it's a good conversation to have, see how they react to it, and perhaps you can get something in there. But I mean, if you're able to show through research of your own that they acted negligently or did not perform the duties they promise to perform, I think that's a pretty reasonable argument to expect them to own up to some of the costs involved. However, that's not a very rebel way to think about things, is it? We don't look at other people and say, this is your fault, particularly since you would have been in a position to make this work out better. Even if you are paying these folks X amount of money per month for their services, simply fully delegating the tenant screening process to them, I think, is never wise, or at least until you've gotten to the point where you have faith in their abilities to do it. Faith is best saved for other things. They've proven to you, they have earned your respect in terms of how they've treated the process. So maybe down the road, you don't need to look over their shoulder as much. However, whenever you start this process, you are going to let them know you expect to see the background material on every single applicant to rent your property. You want to see all the check boxes checked. You want to see that they've done a background check. You want to see that they've checked on their rental history. You want to see that they've called all of the references that were given by the tenant. And I expect you not only to check that all those things are written on a piece of paper saying they did it, but I expect you to spot check it. I expect you to call one or two of those references. Anything you can check on your own, I suggest you do it just to verify that what they put down as the results of their effort match what you experience. In fact, someone may even say, someone else already called me about this. Well, great. Then you know that they actually did their job and they've earned a little bit of your respect. All right. Number 5 on their list. You may want to live close to your property anyway. They make the point here that a rental property should be close enough to walk to. And they point out that's a bit of an exaggeration. But if you're over an hour's drive from your rental, you probably need someone to do some of your work for you. That work costs money and your investment return will be less. I disagree with this one. I don't think that's necessarily required. Could it make your life easier as a brand new property manager / investor? Yeah. However, all you really need to do in today's world is have access to the phone numbers of people who can solve the various problems you're likely to be faced with, which are going to be related most likely to plumbing. So you're going to want you're going to want a handyman and a plumber on speed dial who are in the local area to be able to dispatch them to take care of problems. That's really it. I know far too many investors who have not lived by this particular rule, who live miles and miles, states and states, half the globe away from their property investments, who do manage them themselves, who've been dramatically successful. So I think this is a self-limiting factor that you don't need to self-limit on. Number 6, you have the ability to wear 2 or 3 hats. When you are a property investor, you need to determine your strengths. Often you can be good at multiple things and increase your revenue, just as companies either buy or other companies do their own work in-house to save money, you can too. So this is a good one. I get where they're going with this one. And you can absolutely take care of a lot of the things yourself. But ultimately, the true reality is that you can wear whatever hat you want to wear relating to your property. And you can take on as much as you want to take on. And here's another reality. There are people who I know that have full-time jobs that do this, that have a full-time job, own several rental properties, all of them relatively far away. I think they have one property that's within about 45 minutes of their home, but the rest of them are very far away. One of them owns a property in Virginia, others have another property in San Diego, and then they have one up in I think it's Fremont. And they're able to, and they work full time. So this is all stuff they're able to manage. It's not out of the realm of possibility for you to have a lot of different things going on in your life and still be able to take care of all the things that need to be taken care of as it relates to your investment properties. All right, number 7 on their list. You can take the middleman out of maintenance calls. Now, this very much dovetails with item 6, and it basically just means that in addition to doing the maintenance, the property management of it, and being the owner and handling all those things, you can be the maintenance guy that you can take, where you can take care of the issues relating to the property. I've gotten to the point where I would probably be kind of okay with this. I've had enough work that I've had to do on rehab homes where I actually feel pretty comfortable with plumbing. And in my experience, the number one thing seems to be plumbing as it relates to rental properties. Am I going to want to get out there with the roto-rooter and get into the sewer lines? I've done it with my own stuff, but I'm not so sure I'd be wanting to do that with my tenants' stuff. So there may be a line you do not cross, but the idea of taking care of maintenance issues yourself is absolutely something you can put on the hook of things that you do if you've decided to go local. But again, I have folks who have excellent luck simply by having a list of a few different service folks in the area where their property is. And while it may cost you a little money, I think that it's still a worthwhile thing to do when you're seeing positive cash flow from a property. Does it reduce your cash flow? Yeah. But your cash flow is still going to be positive, or at least it should be. And it can simply be another line item you've got that you're budgeting for in terms of having to pay for maintenance. So just keep that in mind as you're working through the process. They give an example here that I thought was kind of worthwhile. So I thought I'd share this with you. The renter here, and this guy who's writing this article is actually worth listening to. He's actually an active investor. And he explains here that in the 25 rentals he manages, he averages 1 or 2 calls per week maximum. Many weeks he gets no calls. That's 50 to 100 per year. It works out to a maximum of 2 or 3 calls per year per unit. Many are just questions, no on-site visit required. There might be 1 or 2 calls per month that need maintenance. That's about half a call per year per unit for maintenance. Some units call more often. Some never call. I'm hardly ever called at night. So I just wanted to calibrate you to that because I think that's one of the things that intimidates investors. This guy has got 25 rentals. He hardly ever gets called at night. I've never gotten called at night, but then again, I've only had at any one time, I think I've never had more than 2 units that are being actively rented. So there you go. That's not a huge number. It's definitely not the number I plan on having in a few years. I definitely plan on having much more cash flow coming from rental properties over the next few years. But again, these are all things you can mitigate. If that idea absolutely scares you, well, then maybe that 10% per month is worth it to you. And again, these kinds of things are made a little bit easier by having closer proximity, but shouldn't be a deal breaker if you simply can't afford the kind of properties that would be nearer to you. And finally, number 8, the internet is there to help you. You can be a property manager and be anywhere in the world as long as you have internet or phone access. This is absolutely true. You need a phone, a Rolodex, or Google. A Rolodex. A short list of contractors helps, but there are thousands of companies that'll do all the work that might be required if you cannot be there to do it yourself. And you think, well, Robert, what if I haven't made contact with a service provider for a certain thing? Let's say the problem is the roof. It's a roof problem. There's something leaking. Well, you know what? That's why the internet gives us Yelp. Find roof contractors on Yelp, call them up, let them know what the situation is, and have them fix it. It has never been easier to be a long-distance property owner than it is today, given the access we have to information relating to services we might need through the internet. So just keep that in mind. So many of these would be great things to have on your list if this were 25 years ago, 30 years ago. All you need to embrace is some of this great technology that's out there. Let go of some of your fears, and this can be the greatest experience of your life. And I'll tell you what, that very first time you start seeing money coming in, just because you're renting a piece of property, providing a service to someone that needs it, it's a great feeling. You're doing something that's helping somebody else out, but you're also doing something that's helping to contribute to your success. And you just do that over and over again enough times so that little $100 a month or $200 a month that you're making turns into an amount that replaces what you're making on your job. And suddenly you work for yourself. And that's pretty dang awesome. All right, folks. Thank you very much for making me a part of your day. I understand how valuable your time is, and I hope that for every stretch of time you spend with me, you get a ton of great stuff in return, whether it's things to think about, great ideas, tips, tricks, maybe a new community to think about in terms of a potential investment, or whatever the latest news is. Hope it's all been helpful for you. Thanks again for listening, and I'll talk to y'all next time.